Will you be going to Lambeau, by the way, for the showdown? Vikings-Bears. That's a noon start, I think, I assume?
It's a noon kick.
Yeah.
If there's any...
You're sniffing around, maybe? I mean, keeping your options open?
If someone's got a pair or a single,
okay,
I'll go.
You do it.
Although, you would miss me for sermons.
That's
I'm hightailing it out of there.
You're right.
Yeah. Which I'm sure you're fine with.
Noon start. Maybe Gerby's got some extra tickets he might be able to help you with.
I'm in the market.
I'm going to guess, I haven't checked the spread on this game. I'm going to guess early line here. What's today, Tuesday?
Yeah. Let me look.
I'm going to say the Packers are favored by 6.
You're very close. 6.5 is what I got.
6.5?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
It says it opened at 3.5.
It did?
Now, I don't know if that's the beginning of the season.
Are you going to have anybody back? Because you got a lot of injuries. Is your running back going to be back?
Potentially, but probably not.
Probably not. It's not a serious injury, but it's doubtful. I would think he'd play this week, right?
They basically said if not this week, next week.
Okay. And the tight end is done for the year,
That's
correct?
an ACL, yep.
All right. Who else? You got anybody else that hurts? That
There were some O-lineman issues that were going on. Yeah. So there's plenty of guys on the injury report. But the biggest one is Josh Jacobs. And if they don't have him, that's trouble.
Who is your backup? I don't even know.
Well, there's Emmanuel Wilson.
Okay.
Chris Brooks is there as well.
A problem? You don't have what you'd classify as a big-time backup running back?
Wilson's a fine number 2.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be like, no problem. We go. So, yeah. That's kind of where I'm at.
Dante's small hands, ticked off Vikings fans, no snow lands, Wolves in 5. That's pretty good. That's very good. You could do Gophers at Wrigley on Saturday and then Vikings-Packers at Lambeau on Sunday. That's true. That's a good little trip for a hardcore sports rube, right? Seriously. It'd be easily done. What time? I think the Gopher game is an 11 o'clocker. Pretty sure it's or 11:10, whatever that window. 11 to 2, is it 11 o'clock?
Yep.
Okay. Check. Here's what I'm curious about. Will you check the spread on that game? I'm going to guess Northwestern is favored by 2.5 over the Gophers.
Okay. On the road, 3.5. Northwestern is favored. 3.5
points. That's embarrassing. Now the Cats played they just played a great game and lost at the buzzer on thinking a field goal to Michigan. We might talk about that with Mace in your face.
Well, it should be pointed out too that the Gophers are 6-4. They're bowl eligible.
Yeah,
we heard about it. Northwestern is 5-5. Mm-hmm. And Northwestern is favored by 3.5 points.
The Wrigley Field home advantage.
Yes, the friendly confines.
So they get 2 straight weeks of games at Wrigley to do the Wildcats. So that's a pretty good. That's a very good idea. All right, real quick. Let me be completely honest and above board about this. This is not a rumor that is started by, let's say, informed media people, like a Johnny Athletic, for example, where he might say, "I'm not saying this is going to happen, but there's exploration going on." This isn't that kind. This is a kind where media jackals, in this case, basketball media jackals, are bored. And they start thinking about early results this year. And in this case, the logic is, well, let's take a look at the Clippers. They're a mess. They seem to be going the wrong direction. Their season almost feels like it's over before it's begun. I think Kawhi is hurt again. They got who's the wing player that they got from Phoenix, who had the no trade clause. It'll come to me in a minute. He's already out for the season. So maybe the Clippers say we're done. It's early to say that, but we're done. Meanwhile, these same jackals are saying, well, it looks like the Wolves, as important as Mike Conley has been, and by the way, he's shooting great lately. Maybe it's time for a lesser role for him, longer in the tooth. You have him coming off the bench, but maybe you need a starter, and Dante really isn't a point guard. And even though it's set up where a lot of times the ball ends up in Anthony Edwards' hands, you could say there's an opening there. for a withered and wild point guard. So the suggestion I heard today is, what about James Harden to the Wolves for, it would have to be a package, a bevy of players. Is it even feasible? Now, there's financial implications. Harden makes $39 million this year, and I think he's got a contract for next year where it goes up to, I think it's a player option, that goes up to $42 million. He's longer in the tooth, obviously. Let's check his age. He's 36 years old. By the way, somebody said, well, how old was Dante in his first year? Was he a lot older than J.J. McCarthy? Dante was 23 the first year he played for the Vikings. So he's a year older than McCarthy. He wasn't 20. He's not Brosmer. He's not like 29 years old. Anyway, I digress. And I'll throw it out to the Wolves fans out there. Would they have any interest in that? It's a dangerous move. It's a big move. But we've learned, that Tim Connelly makes big moves. James Harden is playing well. And he's also, I think, shown the ability to not be the main guy anymore, where he's perfectly content, occasionally scoring, and still scoring at times very effectively, but other times just distributing and just getting other people involved, the whole bit. It would be just a dramatic departure. And then I think you'd have to factor in, well, who the hell are you giving up? And I put it this way, if you have to give up, I don't think you can trade Randall in this deal. I don't think you can trade Jaden in this deal, as an NBA source reminds me. Could you get it done, or would you be willing to get it done if, let's say, you traded Dillingham and Naz Reid? Could that do it? I have no idea. And as I said, we're big Conley guys on this show, as you know. I never, ever discount when he's getting it going, even at his advanced age, that he can help this team. But James Harden's a big juice guy, right? I mean, he on the other hand, in the playoffs, he has shrunk from time to time. So you have to factor that in too. So again, it's just an interesting muse that's been sort of speculated on as, well, the Clippers are done. It's a natural place. The Wolves do potentially need help here. So I'll throw it out and see. I'm very curious to see what the texters have to say about it. I'm going to save these texts and take it under consideration how people are responding. A number of people already have, because we've got Seifert coming up next segment. So we'll save them for maybe a little bit after Kevin Seifert. Luigi is going to join at 5:30. We've already had a couple good comebacks to this whole rumor of James Harden. That is an internet rumor, not one, as I said, that's very much media-based at this point. But people trying to put their heads together about the condition of the two clubs. Wolves still very much thinking, and rightly, that they can be in this mix if they get the right pieces and get going the right way. And the Clippers season might already be, as we said, done. Big name is James Harden, but a volatile name as well. That's what I think makes the whole thing, even in a hypothetical way, so interesting to discuss. We'll come back with Seifert. If you have questions for him, Bradshaw and Bryant, KFAN text line. He used the term on Monday, cannibalized. What does the term cannibalized have to do with the current condition of the Minnesota Vikings? We'll give him a chance to explain and get to much more NFL-related next.
The Fan welcomes some great shows at Grand Casino Arena this year. Pentatonics will be there November 20th. Rascal Flatts, January 23rd. Eric Church, February 7th. Tickets on sale now. Get the complete details on all our upcoming shows on the concert page, KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
Back. If you have questions for Kevin Seifert, as we like to call him in the business, please reach out via the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line at 64686. That's 64686. And some of you have already done exactly that. Seifert joining us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. I want to start with, before we get to quarterback and cannibalizing and all kinds of good stuff from some of your more recent pieces, I want to revisit one aspect of the Vikings loss. Not so much the kickoff return itself that then opened the door to the Bears re-stealing the game from the Vikings who had seemingly just stolen it, but what it says, again, about the effectiveness of a rule change. Because I think it's fairly evident that if the NFL had not changed the rule properly to say, you want to kick it through the end zone, that's fine, but now, from now on, teams are going to get it at the 35-yard line. That's what you have to be willing to give up. Then we would have seen the ball obviously kicked through the end zone, or we might have seen a squib. But now you can't even necessarily count on a squib because of where it lands, which all this tells me, Seifert, is that this rule change is a smashing success because it has sort of reinserted a certain amount of strategy to the kickoff return that most of us had given up on, right?
Absolutely. You know, if you kick it out of the end zone, like I think a lot of people wanted the Vikings to do, even with this new rule, the ball goes to the 35-yard line. You're basically like 25 yards away from field goal range, which would be the Vikings 40, and then that becomes like a 58-ish yard field goal. If you combine this kickoff rule with the rule that apparently has changed the distance that the K-balls can go that we talked about a couple weeks ago, and you're talking about you have no choice but to try to pin or I wouldn't say no choice, but the clear strategy, I think, at that point, especially if you trust your kickoff coverage, is to put the ball in play and try to pin them somewhere deeper than that 35-yard line.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Now, to the question of whether, even knowing that the Vikings would have been better served giving them the ball at the 35 and thereby obviously eliminating the possibility of that kind of big return, I am on the side that had no difficulty with the decision because the Bears only needed 3. If they needed 7, I might feel differently about it. But if you need 3 and you're putting them on the 35 and people are kicking field goals as long as they are. Now, the Bears don't have the longest field goal kicker in the league, but he is capable of getting to 50 and maybe even 50. I think he had a 54 in this game, didn't he? I think it was the longest of his career.
And it was room to spare.
Yeah, with room to spare. If it's just 3, you just have to handle, even with a good return guy, you have to handle the return better. And we all know that a lot of lane changes took place, or a lot of people left their lanes. I had no difficulty in a field goal situation with not wanting to concede the 35-yard line to the opposition.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are down on the Vikings special teams, and there's been, plenty of times when there's been penalties on long returns or what have you. But the one of the parts of their special teams that has been really good this year and function at a high level is the kickoff coverage. And Matt Daniels, their special teams coordinator, has stat, and I look back and it appears accurate that of all the kickoff returns they've had against them this year, I think only 3 have gone past the 35-yard line of the 50+ or whatever it was. And so there was a real reason, people talk about analytics and what are the analytics telling you, but you also have to judge the skills or the lack of skills of your team. And one thing that has been pretty reliable has been their kickoff coverage. And so that's, I think, why Kevin O'Connell had a little extra reason to put it in play and why they were so gutted by what happened.
All right. So where does cannibalizing come in to your description of perhaps the current condition of the current condition of the Vikings, the way this season has played out to this point?
Yeah, I mean, they had 2 clear goals coming into the year, and that was, number 1, to compete for a playoff spot like most teams try to do. In their case, very genuinely. There's some teams who just talk about it, but I think based on how much money they spent and the quality of the roster that they assembled, that they very much thought they would be heading for the playoffs. And the other goal was to develop their young quarterback and get to the end of the season and be able to say, like, hey, this is our guy moving forward. We got him all the reps we needed. We didn't have to ask him to do too much because of the great team that he had around him. And basically, as they sit here at 4-6, those two goals, and the word I used was cannibalized each other. That
yes,
because they're trying to develop J.J. McCarthy, they're very unlikely to make the playoffs, and like that one has led to the other. And so it always was a possibility, and we could, if we end up having the same situation here at the end of the year and we do all the postmortems and all that, I guess we'll question whether the judgment that they were capable of doing both of those things at the same time was sound. But so far, it appears as though they're kind of collapsing on top of each other.
All right, let me ask you for your view on one aspect of what I might call the earnest efforts that most coaches do in a situation like this, damage control, right? A young, in this case, a young quarterback who you're invested in, that you want to believe in, and that you want to not be traumatized by any more than he already is, perhaps, about how this thing is playing out. So today, KOC says one thing Vikings fans can look for when he, meaning McCarthy, gets to the top of his drops. We're really trying to see if we can get him to be a little bit more in a repeatable body position. Now, I'm not here to say that isn't part of what they have to work on, but I believe, and we got a lot of these after the game too, eyes and feet. I don't think they're doing him any favors articulating his issues publicly this way. I don't. It comes off to me as we're dealing with a middle school quarterback who is just a raw talent that has no idea, has never played the position. And it reminds me a little bit of bilateral leg weakness, where whatever the intent was, it ends up working against the player. And we had the base stuff that from a few weeks ago. I just think it unwittingly makes it sound like we've got to repeat this stuff in this guy's ear every 15 seconds as if he's just started playing the position. What do you think?
I mean, to me, it's that, but it's also the larger sense that here we are at the highest level of football on the planet, the NFL, and they're being pretty open, talking about how they're having to sort of teach them how to play the position at this level.
Yes.
Like, I think we can go through all the different postures and the technical words that he's using, but in the larger sense, it's that they have a asset that a high priced asset that they're kind of openly admitting is not equipped yet to play the position at this level, and that they're trying to teach him that in real time. And that's a lot different than, I think, young quarterbacks developing, because we hear about that for every quarterback when no matter how experienced they were in college, no matter how much success they had, when they get to the NFL, there's just a mental level that you take some time to get used to the speed of the game, the complexities of the game, the different defenses that you play. And that's usually the world that you're talking about with quarterback development. Right. And it'll be totally understandable. I mean, there isn't a single quarterback who became a long-term starter who had it all figured out.
Right.
The second they got there. It's like that, but those are the things that they're working on, like understanding NFL defenses, being able to call and spit out the play call of an NFL offense, and knowing the different audibles and knowing all that sort of thing, and being able to get it to a point where you can do it routinely. And that is very much not what they're talking about. They're talking about kind of some basic things that, like, to me, I don't know how realistic it is to think that these things can be improved over the course of a season.
Exactly.
It feels like an off-season thing.
Yep.
But, as a reporter, I'm never going to come down on anybody for being transparent or for providing, quote-unquote, too much information. But I see what you're saying in terms of how that could make JJ feel. But my guess is if they're saying this to us now, this has been said, behind the scenes for many. It's not even a guess. I know, like, been saying behind the scenes for months and weeks and probably months. And so I don't think that he's necessarily getting blindsided by this. I think that there's a point where, like, sometimes having it out there publicly, can speed the process.
Yeah, well, we're kind of saying the same thing. I in just in different ways. It's the alarm bells go off, and if part of what you're trying to do is protect him from the heat that he's getting, it's not helping in that regard at all. I don't think.
The other thing that caught my ear was just the phrase, eager to see the cement start to dry, which to me is another way of saying, like, it's time for you to do these things.
Yes.
We've talked about it a lot. We've laid the foundation, the cement, the house, the foundation of the house is laid.
Yes.
Now it's time for that to dry, and it's time for you to do these things. And so I wouldn't say that Kevin O'Connell or any of the assistant coaches on this team are the kinds of people that try to motivate people in the media or whatever.
Right.
But like if it is being said publicly, then I think that's kind of where they're at privately as well.
Yeah, that may well be very well true. I mentioned this yesterday, and it's a little bit apples and oranges because this is Caleb Williams' second year of actually playing, although it's actually only his first year working with Ben Johnson. But I went after the game back and forth. I got Wine Line here via iHeart to get reaction and listen to the head coach. And then I went to Bears Wine Line to see, okay, what are they saying? And just by luck, I happened to be listening when they played back a portion of the Ben Johnson press conference. And there's the usual questions about, the kickoff return and, showing some toughness and finding ways to win, all the cliches. And then there was, well, how would you evaluate Caleb's performance? And there's a pause from Johnson, and he says, I can't really say. I need to look at the tape. And I'm thinking, whoa, that may well be true. And you often hear, but usually you hear it after a loss or you hear it after, so the word out of Chicago is that the Johnson approach has been a lot of tough love, where he has been a lot harder, and maybe that's, coaching style. Maybe, again, he knows Caleb's second year, so he's going to be a little more impatient about, the cement drying and all that stuff. But I'm curious to know if you think it'll ever get close to that point in a meaningful way with KOC, or are we just talking about completely different coaching styles where he might say, come on, man. Come on, JJ, we need you got to buck up here, man, and you have to concentrate, and we got to challenge you a little bit with maybe a little bit more tough love than we've shown to this point.
I mean, I would argue that is a little bit of what we were just talking about, like the cement drying thing. I think that's just kind of the way he talks, and everybody's got their own ways of communication, and I think the worst spot for a coach to be in is to decide in his head, I got to act a certain way. I've got to get meaner, or I've got to be nicer, or I've got to be drill sergeant guy, or I've got to be, youth coach guy with the orange slices and Capri Sun guy. That won't work, and no player will respond to it. And so O'Connell talks about being the best version of yourself. And in that regard, I don't see him being somebody who can, apply the level of certainly publicly direct, tough love that you're talking about. I think the way it might come out is a lot closer to where, we're eager for the cement to dry. So I don't know how that changes behind the scenes with JJ, but I do think that in his way, that is sort of what's happening already.
Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com, joining us. If you have questions, please, as I said, text us 646-86. So I think I've asked you this before, but I'll ask you it again because it keeps coming up. There are people who think that at times he looks so overwhelmed that the coach actually would be better served throwing out the other QB, Brosmer. And we know some of that is because he played here. Let's be honest. A lot of people wouldn't even know who the hell this kid was if he didn't play here. But there are others saying, well, other teams have occasionally, they had high hopes in San Francisco for Trey Lance, and they went other directions, and you're allowed to it if it's so bad to just throw somebody else out there. The theory is that the only conceivable reason that KOC wouldn't throw him out there is he's afraid that he's going to do well enough that then he's got another headache on his hands. Do you have any reason to believe that might be true?
I don't think he's afraid of that. I think, even in the Trey Lance, Brock Purdy transition that you're talking about, I'm almost positive that Purdy ended up on the field because Trey Lance was hurt, right? And so there was a natural opportunity for him to be out there, and the Lance injury was pretty significant, so it wasn't like he, it was just the high ankle sprain and he's eventually going to come back. Like, there was a broken leg or whatever, and he was done for the year. And so they had a natural reason to put Purdy on the field. But I do think there was a moment in Sunday's game when I think it was a third down, and in the third quarter, and McCarthy way overthrows Justin Jefferson on the sideline, and he throws his hands on his helmet in disgust, and then sprints off the field. And I just at that moment, at least, I'm thinking I wonder if this is it's like he needs to be put out of his misery here, just not to set him back and say, okay, you're not going to play the next few weeks or you're punished or whatever, but just mentally reset, even if it was just for a couple series or whatever. It just looked like he was it was beyond frustrating. And so I asked, and that was when it was at the absolute worst. It was near the end of the third quarter, and first three quarters of that game, his off-target rate was 32 or 33%, which means 1 out of every 3 passes he was throwing was just uncatchable. And so I asked O'Connell, what level of performance do you would he need to be at to consider that, even in just kind of the very short term? And I'm not sure what he thought I was asking, and he basically said he didn't want to go into it. And a lot of people said, well, what do you expect him to say? He's not going to spell out the what he's looking forward to bench the guy. But it just felt like at that moment, at least, that wouldn't have been the absolute worst idea to consider, not to see what Max Brosmer can do and not to, allow the next Brock Purdy moment to happen, but just out of almost sympathy. But, and you talk about tough love, to me, making him go back out there again, even under that circumstance with that body language, I think that there's a little bit of tough love there, and it ended up being to their benefit because he did rally and play much better in the fourth quarter. And if they had taken him out, even for sympathetic reasons at that point, he wouldn't have gotten the opportunity in those reps. So I don't think they made a mistake, but it just popped in my head. And I still think the overwhelming necessity here is to get this guy as many reps as possible, no matter what, unless you are 100% convinced and all your coaching staff agrees that you're doing damage to him by playing him. And that's really the only point of the whole season where I felt like that was even a modest,
it was a fair
question mark.
Yeah, it was an absolutely fair question. Chris Carter yesterday told us that he believes that the Viking, it's essential. He's not giving up on McCarthy, but he thinks it's essential that the Vikings bring in, this was again much to the chagrin of the Brosmer fans, a legitimate backup veteran quarterback. He made it sound like more having to do again with injury than it did with actually trying to get somebody else to compete for the job. What do you think of that? Do you think, and I think he means maybe somebody better than Carson Wentz, I don't know. And again, that's sometimes easier said than done, identifying who that person is. Is that essential, you think, for next? Because the assumption is that whatever happens the rest of this year, at the very least, McCarthy's still going to be in the mix. Or do you think it's actually possible that it could go so bad that they have to rethink everything, even for the 2026 season?
I mean, a lot can happen in 7 games, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of the bottom line. He could turn a corner, and you could get to the end of the year and say, man, that everything I saw in the last 2 months of the year, I feel great about. We'll have a veteran backup. And we'll think through all of those things, but this is our guy. And that's what we're hoping to be at regardless. And I still think there's enough time for that to happen. But you also say, has there been any progress towards that at this point? Like, was his fifth game any better than his first game? And the answer really is no. And so if that's the case, and it kind of like hovers in this general area, and you're planning to compete for a playoff spot next year, it seems that Chris, is making a good argument there, and that really the question becomes, is there a guy like that out there that you could get that could be essentially next year's Daniel Jones? Somebody who comes in theory is competing with your young quarterback, and in the case of Indianapolis, he was clearly the better quarterback, and they went with him, and they've never looked back since. It's hard to imagine if it stays in this kind of general performance area that they could look themselves in the mirror and say, like, I think it's going to be much different next year without having a real strong second option there.
The anytime a quarterback is struggling, no matter his level of experience, part of what gets broken down is how much of it is physical, how much of it is form, how much of it is, following through habits, in terms of how where you're releasing the ball, all that stuff. And then how much of it is mental, how much of it is you're rushing in part because you're pressing because it's not going your way. McCarthy says all the right things, and everybody has talked about leadership skills, and he's a gamer, and he's got the eye black and all this stuff. But and I know this is probably impossible to measure, we can't rule out the possibility that behind the scenes, this is, getting to him more, and that is also that it sort of feeds on itself when things are not going the right way. The mental side of this can't be completely dismissed, can it?
No, not at all. And just from the sense of on Sunday, the first couple downfield passes he makes are, very inaccurate. He had a couple of short passes that went fine, and they were trying to get him into a rhythm, and they, that pass that bounced way before Jordan Addison, had a chance to catch it on the first drive. Like, apparently he had thrown that perfectly 5 times in practice, or however many times they practiced it during the course of the week. It was called because he had thrown it very well and shown them that he could do it. And once that started, there was definitely a snowball effect. I mean, you could say it whichever way you want, but like, even in, the Detroit game and then against the Ravens, his earlier, the part that was on the quote unquote script was going pretty well. And then as he got amped up over the course of the game, his accuracy dipped. But then to the fact that it happened in the first series, I think was just kind of sent things spiraling. And so there's no way it's not at least partially a psychological thing. And he'd only be human if that were the case. But obviously, there's a lot of physical parts involved as well.
I talked to Lieber about this yesterday, and I'm sure you've heard it too. So he recovers nicely with that last scoring drive. It's basically 2-minute offense. I don't know that they huddled at all. If they did, they didn't huddle very much. And so people watch that and they go, well, there it is. He just needs to be in the 2-minute offense all the time because otherwise he tends to overthink. And I refuse to believe it's that simple. But maybe it is. I don't know. Most people say you will get killed by defenses eventually if you constantly try to do, no huddle or go 2-minute. That you can do that earlier in games, and some teams do, depending on trying to keep other people's defense, from making adjustments in terms of personnel. But it's the natural human place that people go. They go, well, look how good he looked. So just have him play in that style the whole time, to which you say what?
Yeah, they should definitely do all the stuff that he does well and do none of the stuff that he doesn't do well, and then everything will be fine.
Right.
Now, you can't do that throughout the whole game. What I've taken from the 2-minute thing, and this was also in the fourth quarter against Detroit when he made that really good third down throw, like, to whatever extent we're talking about mental, psychological, the impact of things snowballing, like, he is not negatively affected by the game situation. We saw that also in the first quarter, the fourth quarter against Chicago, where if anything, he tends to get to lock in and bear down in those really the times when you would see a lot of young quarterbacks fall apart, which is part of what's so confounding about trying to figure out exactly what's up here is that, like, it would be totally normal for a young quarterback to come out, the game's, whatever, first quarter, second quarter, and do okay and fine. And then you get to the fourth quarter when the defense is coming at you, the pressure's on you, the coach is probably amped up a little bit, the crowd's amped up, and he's fine in those situations. Like, he seems to thrive. So maybe what they really should do is just tell him that we need to strive to win the game, and all the drives would be good. No, but I think that's a good sign. You try to pull good and bad out of everything, and it's a good sign that the game situations at least don't seem to be driving him into anything other than being the best he's been all season in those situations.
On that note, we'll let you go. We appreciate the time. We will chat next week. Thanks, Seifert.
Okay, Dan.
Appreciate it. That is Kevin Seifert, who covers the Vikings and the National Football League for ESPN.com, and, of course, joins us weekly as well. Lots of good texts have come in reacting to our discussion. I'm going to try to get to those in the next segment. We have Top 5 at 5 yet to come. We've got Lou Nanny to talk about the red-hot Minnesota Wild as well, about 5:30.
Time now for the Vikings Report on the Fan, presented by Miller Lite. Vikings wide receiver Adam Thielen joins Dan Barreiro next. And
join the Fan's Eric Nordquist, Nordo, at Gray's Food Hall for a Purple Watch Party this Sunday. Party kicks off at noon with Minnesota taking on Green Bay. Plus great food and drinks and your shot to win awesome prizes every quarter. Get all the details, KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
All right, couple quick thoughts before we get to the Top 5 at 5. Don't forget that Louis is scheduled to join at about 5:30 p.m. tonight. So a lot of hockey talk coming, and we'll certainly, if you want to get your questions in early for Luigi, you can do that at any point. Top 5 at 5, as I mentioned, is yet to come as well. I did get a bunch of texts regarding the online James Harden muse about the possibility of him ending up here. And, of course, there's no media steam that such a deal is on the table. It's media folks who are bored thinking, all right, well, the Clippers season might already be over, and the Wolves might be looking for some pep at the point guard position. Harden is one of those volatile, polarizing names. I've tended to be very critical of him, certainly because of his number of his postseason performances. I do think he is playing in a different mode where he doesn't demand the ball as much as he did previously. That's kind of the change in the way he's played as he gets a little bit older. Here's the consensus is there are a few people who are intrigued, but a bunch who aren't. I would want no part of Harden, but I will admit I have a huge bias against him for the way in which he goes about forcing his way off trades, off teams, I guess I should say. Dan, what about Ja Morant? We have talked about him before. There were a couple people who said they'd rather get James Harden than Ja Morant. How about a Wolves trade for Kyrie Irving? Well, he's first of all got to prove that he's healthy enough to play. And then I don't know if there's a lot of reason why Dallas would make a move on him. 651 guy would prefer Harden over Ja Morant. You know at least what you're getting with Harden. Could be the perfect place for him to finally make that jump. Remember, he's failed in the playoffs many times, but he's a great player and good point guard still. I don't get Harden and Randall complimenting each other, especially with Ant. You would need three balls out there. Ja Morant or Harden, say it would take Nas, Dillingham, and Clark. I would take Harden. Absolutely not. He cannot stay on the floor in the playoffs. Defensively, he will not buy in. We need a Drew Holiday type player. If you want a championship, you need the big three. And if getting rid of Nas and Dilly and some picks, well, hell yes. I would trade everything for one championship. Harden has never won anything. If you can get him for one of the kids, maybe, but don't give up the core for him. Harden doesn't play defense at all. Horrible. Heck no to Harden. Guy's never won on any team he has been on. I think not, Dan, on Harden, not exactly a youth movement. Well, I don't think you have to worry about a youth movement at this point. You're trying to give yourself the best chance, I think, to make a run at it. Now, defensively, obviously that does hurt you. And somebody pointed out, hey, the offense has been good this year. The offense really hasn't been the problem. What hasn't been, except that, again, we're going to start playing, a higher volume of teams with winning records, which we still haven't done very well against. We're doing very well knocking out teams we're supposed to dominate, better than they usually do. But in general, the offenses look pretty sharp, one could say. But I think we do have to factor in who the team has beaten through this period of time. Harden is a volume shooter, not a great shooting percentage, not great shooting percentages this season. Are you kidding? James Harden, he's got the worst playoff record than anybody. Come on, should not even be a consideration. I wouldn't touch Harden with a 10-foot beard. Brosmer starts. Put Mike Conley in the carts. Dan is an old fart. Wolves in 5. Well, okay. That's one way, I guess, to look at it. Harden to Wolves. I just threw up in my mouth. That's 503 guy. I asked for opinions, and we've certainly gotten a wide range of them. Top 5 will include
Wild Wolves and some NFL Nuggets.